What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2022 Hyundai Sonata N Line. So about the N Line version of the Sonata here. Well, it's carried over unchanged for 2022, but it's still a really great combination. You have a punchy 2.5-liter turbo 4-cylinder with almost 300 horsepower. You have, the edgier looks here of the N Line version of the Sonata as well, which I think nicely complement this vehicle. The Sonata in general is a little bolder with its styling, but as far as the N Line version here, I have to say that they're pretty subtle with their changes over a regular Sonata. So you have up front there a unique front bumper and has those little like chevron shapes there in the lower part of the air intakes, and a unique grille, and just a little N Line badge there on the front. But I still like how you have the LED headlights here as standard, and how you have this cool little strip that illuminates up the hood here part way. I always thought that the Sonata styling was a little different, but I kind of admired them for trying to stand out a little bit here with the styling. And then on the sides here, they're also pretty restrained. So you have these unique 19-inch wheels. This one is on the all-season tires, but you can get summer tires as an option for just $200 extra. You also see another little N Line badge here on the fender, and then that's it as far as the badges go. So it's, again, pretty subtle. You also have unique side skirts here, as well as black mirror caps, so that also kind of gives it a stealthier look. And then going out to the back there, you do have a unique rear bumper, but it's very mild with its changes over a regular Sonata, but just a tiny bit sportier there. And I still think the back end of the Sonata looks really nice. I love how you have the integrated spoiler in the trunk lid there, the way it kind of just arches upward there, and also having the full width taillights is a cool touch. So I think that it's kind of again, just very understated. The fact there's no N Line badge on the back there, you don't have any kind of huge spoilers or scoops or anything like you see, for example, with the Camry TRD. This is a little bit more subtle, and I think it still looks pretty good, although I have to say that this vehicle's platform mate, the Kia K5 GT, I still think looks a little bit cooler. All right, so let's start up and go for a drive. The Sonata N Line here has the same Hyundai key as any other Sonata, so nothing unique there, but still a nice key. I like how it has a little bit of a satiny finish here on the front, and yeah, just a nice key. But of course, it is keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start here in the Sonata N Line. So you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. And if you're curious to hear about the interior in the Sonata N Line, my wife and I already did an in-depth interior review a couple years back on a regular Sonata Limited, back when these first came out. And so for 2022, there's really no changes here. The N Line version of the Sonata, though, does get a few unique touches I'll go over briefly here. So you'll see you have this gray interior theme for the seats and the dash. Everything is like dark gray instead of just a normal black or beige like you got on other Sonatas. And you'll see the red stitching here on it. A few other main things though that are different are that you have these unique N Line seats, and so they have the leather and then the like synthetic suede inserts in the middle of them here, and they're actually really comfortable large seats. They really have a lot of support, so even if you're on the larger side, lots of like a big long thigh support and everything. And they also have adjustable bolstering, so that's great. So you can have this torso support be as tight or as loose as you like, and the size of the bolsters is great, and so really fantastic seats. You also have a slightly unique steering wheel here with the N badging, the red stitching, again more of that gray leather, and also some nice paddle shifters here right on the back of the wheel. But it just has a great 9-3 grip and these cool little 10-2 notches, and just a really nicely done wheel. Otherwise, everything else in here is the same as any other Sonata, basically. So a couple interesting things here is that all N Line versions of the Sonata come with basically one trim. The only option you can get is summer tires. So they all come with the Bose stereo, which is nice. They all come with digital gauges and this larger infotainment screen. You get the panoramic roof, wireless charging pad, lots of good stuff here. And so it's really nice they keep it nice and simple here with just the one trim. But it is worth noting, for example, you have no cooled seats, no heated steering wheel, and those are two things you can get with an optional package on the K5 GT, which again, same car underneath, same engine, all that stuff. So it is worth noting, if you do like this combination and you're willing to go over to the Kia, you can get some nicer features there in that if you're wanting those. But I think they've really nailed all the basics here in the N Line version of Sonata, and going after what most enthusiasts I think value the most, with the heated seats and the good tech and all that. And so overall, pretty nice interior. All right, so setting off here in the Sonata N Line. So the first thing that I'm noticing about this, well, I think probably the first thing is, you have excellent visibility here in the Sonatas. You have, a nice thin A-pillar, nice little window there right by your side mirrors, which are off onto the doors. Very good view out, very easy to drive in that regard. One thing though that is interesting whenever you're first pulling out of even a parking lot is you'll notice this 8-speed wet dual clutch transmission. And it's just noticeable because you can always feel it engaging every once in a while. Whenever you're inching up especially, whenever you're reversing in parking lots, things like that, you know, you will definitely notice that. So it's not going to be quite as smooth whenever you're doing those small little inching up maneuvers than something with a real torque converter automatic, which is basically all the competitors this competes with. But you know, once you're up and moving, it's not a big deal, and you know, it's still totally fine and smooth, and I'd say it's pretty refined still too, so not a big deal. And in exchange for, you know, the extra little bit of unrefinement, you are going to have quicker shifts than all the normal torque converter automatics and all the other competitors. So it just depends on whether you're okay with that trade-off. But other things I really love about the Sonata here are that you have really nice light steering. It's pretty just responsive still, but I just like that it's not overly heavy or trying to be too sporty or anything like that. But you can go up and put it into a sport mode if you want to have the steering be a little bit heavier, and we'll try out sport mode here in a minute. But other things here, you know, this engine is really just so nice and powerful, and so even whenever you're not trying to fly around, it just means that you always have really good punch at basically any RPM. And you have a nice little rumble from it there, but it's not, you know, an unrefined engine or anything. This brand new 2.5 liter motor that Hyundai uses, but it's also in Genesis models, Kia models, everything they put this engine in, I'm very impressed with this engine. It is a really strong, wonderful engine, honestly, and I really like it. Other things here though, you have a pretty responsive throttle, so there is a little bit of a tip in before you start getting some response out of it. But thankfully, you know, with this engine, you don't really have any kind of turbo lag or anything to wait for. Just a nice meaty surge as you tip into the gas there, so that feels really nice and powerful. Brakes also have a good amount of bite right as soon as you start tipping in. There's like a couple millimeters of dead travel, and then it's right there to start grabbing nice and strong. So that is always very reassuring to have something that's nice and reacting like that. But anyway, we're gonna go ahead and put it up into the Sport Plus mode. There's a regular Sport mode too, but Sport Plus mode turns off traction control. The roads are a tiny bit damp, but let's turn onto this back road, see how it does. Jeez. It just wanted to do a rolling burnout there on me. Oh, that's definitely the fun way to go, is to have traction control be off. Oh man, but wow, it's just hanging out at $4,000 here. It just wants to keep me in those upper RPMs. Interesting. So anyway, the Sonata N Line here is a very punchy little car. It runs, again, that 2.5 liter turbo 4. It does 290 horsepower, 311 pound-feet of torque. It'll do 0 to 60 time of 5 seconds flat, is what Car Driver got. But interestingly, that wasn't with the launch control this car does have. Instead, they did their own kind of launch, and were able to get a better time for the launch control. So if you're using launch control, maybe, you know, it'll be a low 5-second kind of time. But either way, it's very punchy, and honestly, the 0 to 60 time is going to be a little misleading because you're talking about a car that clearly can't put that power down super well, at least in these conditions. And so, you know, if you had better traction, you know, I think this would definitely be in the 4s for sure, because it feels very, very strong. So whenever you are, you know, doing those rolling accelerations, that's where you're really going to feel this thing. It's going to feel faster than a 5-second car, I think. And now we're on this little bit of a rougher road here, and it doesn't really have too much road noise, you know, just, you know, pretty refined for this segment of vehicle. I don't think it's the most refined in this segment, but certainly I think very good for the most part. Anyway, we're coming up some corners here I always go around. Let's see how the Sonata N Line handles. So, pretty good amount of grip here. It's a little bit snowy here. The roads are a little bit wet, so I'm not going to be able to push it quite as much as I usually would. But this thing still handles itself very well. So, you know, Sonatas already were pretty good handling for this generation, but of course here for the N Line version, they did stiffen things up a little bit. So you have firmer dampers now, you have thicker anti-roll bars, and you also have these Pirelli, these are the P0 all-season tires. You can, again, get summer tires as an option for just $200. I believe they're Continentals. But these Pirelli all-seasons are still 245 wide, you know, 19-inch wheels, and so it's very flat. There's really no body roll or anything, and feels pretty good here. But one thing you will notice is that you do not have a limited slip differential here, and that is really the downfall of most of the vehicles in this segment. Is, you know, they're they definitely want to spin the tires on corner exit, and especially without traction control on and stuff on this one, you know, it's going to be very eager to do that. So you get a little bit of torque steer. Now, is it terrible? No. Honestly, I think torque steer is kind of fun these days, and I think it kind of livens up an experience that otherwise would be a little bit more dead and subdued. So, you know, it's not sloppy in my experience here so far. I will continue to play around with it. Now, obviously, if you do, you know, give it too much power coming out of a corner or something, you know, that will cause it to understeer, because you'll just have the torque steer and just wheel spin going off into oblivion. So you have to be smart about it. It's not going to put down power as well as some of the best front-wheel drive sporty stuff like a Civic Type R or even a Civic Si, honestly, which has, you know, the better, you know, limited slip diff up front, which really helps with front traction. It's also worth noting that not having a limited slip diff also opens you up to having suboptimal winter performance, you know, because if it's this eager to spin the tires when the roads are just a little bit damp, you know, whenever the roads are really wet or snowy, you're definitely going to want to have snow tires to at least give you a fighting chance, because otherwise, I mean, this thing is just going to be spinning all over the place. But it handles itself very well. Now, trying to compare it to all the other competitors, I think that you have a little bit of a lower sitting position in the Accord. The Accord feels a little more athletic and a little bit lighter. The Accord is about 100 pounds lighter than this, by the way. These weigh about 3,541 pounds. And the Accords are in the 3,400 range with the 2.0 turbo versions of those. Camry, though, is about the same weight as this for a Camry TRD. That has a V6, so a little bit of a bigger engine and stuff. And I'll say that the Camry TRD, I think, has a little bit of a stiffer suspension setup, so that felt even maybe a little bit more eager to dive into corners than this does. So I don't think this is the best in the handling department as far as those go. The Mazda 6 2.5T, it's been a few years since I've reviewed one of those, but that's a little bit on the softer side. So if you want a bunch of power and you want probably the smoothest ride possible, I'd say go for the Mazda. This and the Kia K5 GT are very similar, just from my recollection here. I drove the K5 GT a little under a year ago, and that also handled very, very good, but same kind of deal where, you know, you're wanting for some more traction, but otherwise, you know, they're very good handlers. But I went ahead and put it back into the regular sport mode to see what we do with traction control actually on, and here we go. All right, so it starts that wheel spin and then cuts back, and yeah, but you know, I think it actually, you know, if you want a more composed setup, you know, clearly doing that's going to be the better way to go, but it's not as much fun. But if you're trying to preserve your tires, you still get plenty of forward thrust here with it just in the regular sport mode here. Also, I gotta say, the steering is a nice bit weightier here in the sport mode. Throttle response is also, you know, a little bit more responsive here and feels good. Now, there's also a custom mode, by the way. That custom mode will allow you to individually toggle the steering, the powertrain, and the ESC, so you can have all three of those in a separate different setting if you'd like. Also, one last thing to mention about the handling here is that you have bigger brakes here on the N Line version of the Sonata. So they're 13.6 inch rotors in the front now and 12.8 inch rotors in the rear, so beefed up all around, and haven't had any complaints with the braking so far. I'll continue to, you know, play around with that and see, but so far, yeah, I think they just love how they kind of bite right towards the top of the pedal and feel very eager. Just like this engine, though. This whole car feels very eager. Oh man, yeah, this front end will definitely slide around on you, though, for sure. You have to be smart about how you deploy the power in this thing. But I think that just adds to the fun experience here that's not an N Line, so I don't think it's really bad. It also has a good little sound whenever you're getting on it. So there is like an active sound enhancement. You can toggle, there's like 4 different settings as far as how loud or how quiet you want, or you can have it off completely. I have it on the loudest setting currently. So that might be adding a little bit more muscularity to the sounds you're hearing here. But I'm all for these sounds, you know, I mean, I think it just adds, again, to the fun experience here of this car, and especially since considering there is no loud exhaust or any kind of induction note or anything really, I kind of welcome the assistance from the speakers there a tiny bit. But this is a fun thing to drive, though, and with these seats gripping you in nice and tight, I mean, it still feels like you can just really, you know, carve up a back road pretty good. Also, we have the paddle shifters here. There's no dedicated manual mode, but you just start pulling the paddles and it immediately starts shifting on you here. Wow, this thing, yeah. Wow, yeah, it's struggling to put the power down, but oh, it's so fun. But pretty quick downshifts. Yeah, this is definitely, the shifts are much better than what you're going to be getting with all the competitors, again, outside of the K5 GT, which uses the same transmission. But yeah, upshifts, this transmission is interesting though, because the upshifts are definitely slower than the downshifts by a little bit. I'm not sure why. Typically you're looking for the other way around, but overall, both for upshifts and downshifts, they're quicker than all the torque converter automatics and all the competitors. So I'll take it. And yeah, I think it's a really good transmission, again, as long as you're okay giving up the little bit of smoothness at those low speeds. And now just hitting some potholes and a little bit of a bumpier road here. You feel that it's, a tiny bit firmer than a Sonata, because the Sonatas are pretty nice and comfortable generally. And so here with this, you feel the bumps a little bit more, but it is still very comfortable, very family friendly here with the ride and everything. No complaints whatsoever with the ride, even with these firmer dampers. And now we're out on the highway here in the Sonata N Line, and I have the highway drive assist system on, although this doesn't seem to be quite as advanced as the other highway drive assist systems in other Sonatas, because this system, it's still doing the lane keeping assist and the steering assist for me. It has the adaptive cruise and all that here in the N Line version, but it doesn't actually tell me that it's highway drive assist, so I'm not sure if there's a slight little differentiation there. But regardless, it's been doing the steering here fairly well, but the Hyundai system still really struggles, at least in my area, to keep track of the road lines. And so there was one time going around a little corner there where the light just turned off, and the Hyundai system is one of the worst, where it won't actually give you a good notification that it quit tracking the road lines and it quit giving you that assist. So like you just have this little green icon here in the top of the gauge cluster here, and that is your only indication that's giving you any kind of steering assist. Whenever that quits illuminating, then it just gives up on you. So you always have to be on your toes with this system. There's other systems like Subaru's system, for example, that once it quits tracking the road lines, it will beep at you to let you know that that's the case, and so you're actually aware of what's going on. This doesn't have any kind of warning like that, so with this system you really just have to always be babysitting it. Unfortunately, I don't love this highway drive assist system. It also let me down in past Sonatas where it just would straight up go over the road lines and not hold the lane. The Kia K5 GT was the same thing, unfortunately. But otherwise, all the other, adaptive cruise control stuff works really well. It's also worth noting though, like, you don't have all the safety tech you can get in Sonatas. So like, you don't have the blind view monitor here where, you have a little picture of your blind spot when you turn your turn signal on. That isn't present here in this. And, but otherwise, you still have blind spot monitoring and all those types of great features. And so, still a good amount of safety tech for sure. And it's just a really nice highway cruiser too. Of course, with this 8-speed dual clutch, you can just cruise, 60 miles per hour at like 1500 RPMs. You don't even hear the engine, and you just kind of, cruise along, and it's nice and comfortable. So really a nice cruiser whenever you aren't trying to drive around super fast either. But anyway, that's all of my initial impressions here on the Sonata N Line. But thanks to Hyundai, I'm going to have this vehicle for an entire week. So I'm going to drive around all over the place. Then I'll come back, give you guys my final real-world fuel economy, as well as my thoughts on the pricing and how it compares to its competitors, and anything else that I noticed during my week of driving. Alright, so I've been driving the Sonata N Line here for a week now, and it's been a lot of fun. I haven't put as many miles on it as I would have liked to, though, because we got a good amount of snow here this week, and this thing with no limited slip diff and just all-season tires with this much power in front-wheel drive, it's a handful. Even just whenever the roads are just a little bit wet, it'll gladly spin the tires. And actually, it'll gladly spin the tires even whenever it's dry. So if you are planning on buying one of these, definitely make sure you have a healthy budget for tires, because you're going to be roasting the fronts off of this thing even without trying. Like, honestly, there was times where I was just like doing a run to Starbucks. I was driving very casually, not in a hurry or anything, and this thing still just like wanted to roast the tires if I would just tipped into the gas just a little bit too much. Obviously, traction control will kick in and limit that, but it still is like very eager. And I also witnessed this with the K5 GT, so this isn't, a shocking revelation or anything, but just something, especially when it's the wintertime here. I found myself this week, whenever there was a little bit of snow on the ground, I just ended up taking our daily driver with all-wheel drive and snow tires, because I knew this thing was going to be a handful if I was caught out in a pretty snowy patch. So anyway, the only other thing I can really report on here as far as my experience over the week is that, I didn't love, from a stop, the dual clutch transmission. It's not super smooth, but honestly, as the week has gone on, and even whenever I was, inching up and drive-through lines and things like that, it really is actually quite good. So definitely don't let that scare you off. Even if on a test drive it seems a little bit rough, I think, you know, you do get used to it, and I think the car also kind of improves little by little as well. And so, you know, I'm actually, you know, still really impressed with this dual clutch transmission. But anyway, the last couple of things I mentioned here are the fuel economy and the pricing here and how it compares to its competition. So first off, fuel economy here. So again, I didn't drive this vehicle as much as I would have liked to. I'm sitting at around 85 miles here of driving, but my fuel economy average has still been about 22 mpg. It's a slight bit less than that, but that's also because there's been a lot of idling to clean the snow off the car and things like that. So, you know, I'd say with my normal type of driving and stuff, I'd be getting, you know, 22 easily, maybe even a little bit higher. Now, these are rated at 23 mpg in the city, 33 on the highway, and 27 combined. So, you know, I'm falling right in line with what I usually get. I end up getting 1 to 2 mpg less than the city rating typically in most of my driving, and so this falls right in line with that. And you know, I think for having, you know, almost 300 horsepower and the kind of performance you have here in this, you have, you know, a nice large vehicle, you know, good amount of comfort and stuff, to be getting well over 20 mpg, I'm pretty happy with that. And that, again, falls right in line with basically everything else in this segment. Anyway, so happy with that. And then the last thing to mention here is the pricing of the Sonata N Line. And I think that is a thing they really did a good job on here. And I think they kind of were going for a similar buyer as stuff like the Camry TRD and stuff like that, because pricing wise, this is just a couple $100 within a Camry TRD pricing. As tested is about $34,500. That's a lot of car for the money. To have almost 300 horsepower, yes, it's only front wheel drive, yes, you don't have a limited slip diff, but otherwise, you know, having the big screen, having the Bose stereo, the panoramic roof, you know, the partially leather, partially suede kind of seats and stuff, you know, I think you get a good amount of stuff here for the money, in addition to having, you know, the good performance. And so, you know, I think that it really depends on what you're looking for, because, you know, for example, a K5 GT from Kia, you know, same engine, same platform, very, very similar driving dynamics and stuff, that if you want to have a regular version which doesn't give you digital gauges but otherwise has basically all the same stuff you get here in this, and that one as tested is about $2,000 less expensive than this. And I honestly still prefer the styling of the K5 a little bit better than the Sonata, so for my money, you know, I still think that's the slightly better buy. And the nice thing with the K5 GT is there's also a GT1 package you can add on, and with that package you get cooled seats, you get heated steering wheel, and a few other toys. And you know, that's $2,000 more. It just comes down to whether or not cooled seats and heated steering wheel and a couple other things are worth $2,000 more to you. But it's just nice that you have that option, so that, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of people that wish they could get that stuff in a Sonata N Line that maybe prefer this styling over the K5. So it's just nice that Kia gives you that option. And so, you know, if you are feeling like you're missing out on features, definitely check out the K5 GT. Very, very similar to this, you know, experience-wise, and you have those nice features as long as you're okay giving up the digital gauges. Which, I mean, you know, these digital gauges are nice, but it's not like the end of the world if you don't have them, in my opinion. And then the only other few competitors here are, I think, you know, like I said, Camry TRD is only a couple $100 more than this. It's a different experience, though, because there's no turbo there. You have to wind out that V6, which some people might prefer. You have the V6 sound with the TRD exhaust on the Camry TRDs. That's also a nice, fun experience, and, you know, a few less features. So, you know, I feel like you get a little less for your money in the Camry, but if you are someone who, you know, would prefer a naturally aspirated, you know, V6 experience, that's the only game in town as far as that goes anymore. And then I also think that a really good option a lot of people might not check out is the Mazda 6 2.5T. You can get a Grand Touring trim, which has all the same kind of stuff this does, just with a slightly smaller screen, and you know, you don't have digital gauges in that or anything. But those are about $3,000 less expensive than this, coming in right at $31,500, and you actually get about 10 more pound-feet of torque in the Mazda 6 over this. It's the only one that has more torque than this does. Now, horsepower is down by 40 compared to this. So in a drag race, this still might be better, but this also is going to spin the tires a lot more than the Mazda will. So it might be a closer race than you think, even with the 40 horsepower difference. But regardless, you know, if you are someone wanting to look for a bargain and you still, you know, want a similar type of package, the Mazda 6 is definitely not as sporty with its handling. It's a little bit more on the luxury side, so it just comes down to, you know, what exactly you're looking for there. But if you're okay with a little bit of a softer ride and softer handling, I think the Mazda 6 interior is actually more luxurious. It has full leatherette seats there in that Grand Touring trim. there's that wheel spin again. But also the Mazda 6 does give you wireless smartphone integration, which is something that both the Kia and the Hyundai can't offer. And so, you know, there are some advantages there to the Mazda for $3,000 less once again. So definitely it's something worth considering, again, if you're not someone who needs the absolute best handling. And then the last one that I want to mention here briefly is the Honda Accord 2.0T. So the Accord is kind of odd with the way they did the trim structures, because you can't get an EXL, which is the closest trim to this, with the 2-liter turbo motor. The only way to get that motor is to either go for the sport trim with cloth seats and a lot less features than this, or you can go up to the touring trim, which has cooled seats, heated rear seats, head-up display, and all kinds of other stuff, and that's $38,000, and then that puts you way over this. So there's not really a good trim that really competes head-to-head with this. So, you know, but I do have to say one last thing is that the Accord is probably still my favorite handling of the bunch as far as all these, you know, powerful front-wheel drive sports sedans go. And so, you know, take that for what it's worth. You know, if that's something you really care about, I do think the Accord is really fun with that. But the Accord also loves to spin the tires because they neglected to put a limited slip diff in the Accord as well. So just one last thing to mention there with that. But overall, it's just really actually fun that there's so many good options in this segment. So if you're someone who wants, you know, a nice, large, comfortable family car, but you still want to have something that puts a smile on your face whenever you punch it, this is going to be a really good option. But then also, you know, all the other ones are a lot of fun as well. So just comes down to personal preference, really. But I think that, you know, they did do a very good job of the pricing here, so that this has a nice little niche of its own, and depending on what you're looking for, this could be exactly fitting, you know, that criteria. But anyway, that's it as far as all of my thoughts and impressions here on the Sonata N Line. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Huge thanks to Hyundai for providing me here with the Sonata N Line to review for you guys today. And yeah, thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care.